Hi, thanks for joining us. My name's Rachael Telleen. I work for A Touch of Grace Hospice. Also joining us tonight is Elise Dixon, an attorney with Barclay, Dixon & Smith. Ms. Dixon's going to be helping answer some questions for us tonight about advanced directives. For some people, this may be something you've already discussed with your family, you may have in place, but unfortunately a lot of people do not. And so we really wanted to take this opportunity because it's something that's much better to have discussions on before you actually need them. When someone's in a crisis, it's much more difficult to have these conversations, and so the goal is to have these conversations in advance, which is what Ms. Dixon's going to help us discuss. So for our viewers to understand, how would you define advanced directives?
Well, in Illinois, we usually call them power of attorneys.
Okay.
So there's two types of powers of attorneys in Illinois, one for health care and one for property. And a power of attorney is a document in which you designate someone to act on your behalf if you become mentally incompetent and cannot make decisions for yourself. So for health care, you would allow that person to make those medical decisions for you if you are in a coma or have a stroke and can't express what your wishes are. And property is kind of a misnomer. It really means your business, so someone who could take care of your checking accounts, any type of business activities or transactions that you would have.
So those are two separate documents, though. So you'd have to have one for healthcare and one to take care of your other.
Correct, because in Illinois we do not have one general one. We have two specific statutory forms.
All right. Now, I am guessing a lot of people don't have these documents in place.
That's true.
When do you recommend that someone have these documents?
My recommendation is as soon as someone turns 18, because legally, once you are considered an adult, no one can make decisions for you but you. So a lot of times we don't do this until we get older. A lot of calls that I get are when people are actually in the hospital or in a nursing home. And then sometimes it's too late depending on your mental capacity. But my recommendation is to do it as soon as you can. There is no age in which it is a good time to do it. As soon as you turn 18, really, you should do it.
Now, for example, say something would have happened to me and I went to the hospital and I couldn't make my own decisions. Who would make them for me then?
Are you married?
I am married.
Okay, so most people think the spouse has the ability to make decisions for you, and really, unless you have a power of attorney in place, your spouse would need to go into court and get the authority to make those decisions for you. So if you're in the hospital, you don't have a power of attorney in place, and you can't make decisions, then legally your family needs to go into court and get what's called a guardianship.
Now, working in hospice, I know that doesn't happen that happens if maybe there's issues with the family, but they do sometimes allow
Yes, they do. And
a husband to make those decisions.
Yes, and legally the hospital or the health care center really is kind of putting themselves out there legally, because if you have children, let's take a second marriage, for instance, where there might not be the best of blood between the spouse and the children, and you make a decision that goes against what the kids want, then you're involved in a legal battle. So that's, again, why you put these things in place now, why you have the mental capacity to do so, so that you can help protect your family from having to go through some type of litigation.
Well, and I think the other thing is, unless people have had these discussions, who's to say your husband even knows what your wishes are?
Sometimes you don't even want your spouse to make those decisions, depending on what your relationship is. And you know, it seems like I'm being funny, but I mean, we all know people who have been married but live separate lives.
Right.
And the spouse may be the last person that you want to make that decision for you. So, yeah, we don't like to talk about this a lot of times, but all of us know people who have been in situations where they did not have this in place, and the family's in turmoil, fighting over who has the right to make the decisions for mom or dad.
Right, and we have seen that. Working for a hospice, we work with a lot of families. We provide support when patients are at end of life, and that's when we see a lot of these issues coming up. And it's definitely a concern when families haven't had these conversations and don't have documents in place. it can add a huge level of stress, because some of the children may think mom would have wanted one thing, some think very strongly that mom would have wanted something else. And when mom can't speak, it's a very difficult situation.
Yes, and I think a lot of people think if they talk about it, then it's going to happen.
Right.
And so they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. I get people when I do presentations to say, oh yeah, I need to get this done. But unfortunately, a lot of times it happens after the fact. And again, if you're mentally incompetent, there's nothing that we can do but go into court. The power of attorney for health care is a wonderful document, because actually it's been changed recently. As of last summer, it changed, and it kind of expanded the powers for the power of attorney for health care purposes. There's a section on there regarding organ donation, if you want to give your organs away. It expands the ability for the power of attorney to make decisions with your body if you've passed away, get access to your medical records, and it's also expanded the life support choices that a person has, and that's usually where the family comes in turmoil, is whether or not to keep someone on a respirator or not.
And that's what we would call a DNR, or do not resuscitate.
Yes, so the power of attorney has three basic choices. One, you leave it up to your agent to make that decision of whether or not to keep you on life support or not. The next decision goes to the doctor, and you choose to keep life support except if you're in a coma or have an incurable disease. And then the last choice is to just keep me on forever, until God takes me away from here.
And I think what's important is that no one, Ms. Dixon or I, no one is suggesting what that decision for you should be, but the goal is for you to make that decision and not to have to worry that someone else is going to make that decision for you. And having the documents in place allows your wishes to be followed, not asking someone else in your family to make that decision.
Right, and I can't think of the young lady who was in Florida who was on life support. Her name escapes me, but Terry Schiavo. That's an excellent example of someone who was young, got into an accident, I believe, and was, in a coma for basically all of the rest of her life. And she had parents and a husband who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to determine whether this lady should stay on life support or not. And so again, when we're dealing with choices like this, it's really about your family. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners out here have gone through experiences with parents, and so if you've gone through that, my motto is, why would you put your own family through that? Is you have a responsibility to make sure that your family doesn't have to go through the same heartache or trials that you've gone through.
I agree. So I am putting some information up on the screen now. If you do want to call Miss Dixon, like I said, she's an attorney with Barkley, Dixon, and Smith. Her contact information is on the screen. Her direct phone number is 312-553-0336. And they also have a website, www.barkleydixon.smith. Smith.com.
Yes.
That didn't sound right. Once I pushed this button back, I'm like, that definitely was not correct. Sorry about that. The other thing, this is a call-in show. It's a live show, so if you have questions and you're watching right now, you're welcome to give us a call at 312-738-1060. We're also happy to answer any questions you have about hospice. I know it's kind of a scary term. It's a scary idea of having to use hospice, but our goal is to take some of that fear out, provide education, so that it's something that more people feel comfortable. It's a free service, and it's something we encourage people to utilize when that's a place where they're at. So going back to advanced directives or power of attorneys, one of the other things we hear is a living will.
Okay.
So what's a living will in comparison to what we've already talked about?
Well, a living will is narrowly defined, and it just deals with end-of-life issues. A power of attorney is a broader document, and a living will just deals with end-of-life issues. So if you are been diagnosed with a terminal illness, you're stating that you do not want any more life-sustaining treatment to be provided to you. So it's another type of a DNR as well.
Oh, it is. I was going to
Yes.
say, because that sounds more like a DNR.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how would someone, if someone wanted to put something in place, how would they go about getting these documents and putting them in place?
Well, they can buy them online. They can buy them in a stationery store. But I always caution people when you do legal documents, and even hospitals with healthcare powers of attorney, a lot of them will give those to you. If you're in the hospital, you're about to have surgery, the hospital, the doctors want to know who would have the ability to make decisions for you if something happens. But I encourage you to always try to seek out legal advice, because a lot of times when I see these documents, they are not filled out properly. One of the main issues is the start date and the ending date. So a hospital may not accept a power of attorney if you don't tell it when it begins or when it ends. And you don't have to put dates certain in there. Sometimes I put when my physician determines that I'm mentally incapable of making decisions, that's when it starts, and it ends when I'm determined to be mentally capable of making decisions. So depending on the age of the person, if I have someone who's in their late 70s, early 80s, their health may be a little tenuous, then we make it start on the date that they do sign the power of attorney and ends upon their death. So you can go online and get these documents. You do not have to come to an attorney, but I highly recommend it.
Okay. That is one of the things that I think people assume you don't put these in place until you need them.
Mm-hmm. Right, and when you need them, you can't do it.
Right.
Yeah, that's usually what happens, is that, people think, okay, well, I'll do this when I'm in my 70s or my 80s, because that's when my life is going to end. But we know people who die in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Like I said, we don't know what life is going to give us. So you need to do it as soon as possible. And, again, you want to make sure that you have the person in place that you want to make those decisions for you.
Now, who do you give these documents to? So if I complete all these documents, how do you know that the right people are going to get them when you do need them?
Well, I always encourage my clients to give a copy to your doctor, because you want to make sure that this is in your medical records, and also give a copy to the people that you've named as your agents, because they need to have copies so that if something does happen to you, they know that they are the ones that have the authority to make decisions for you if something happens.
Okay. Now, who do you recommend? So if someone's, like you said, it may not always automatically be your spouse, may not be your eldest child. When you're trying to figure out who is the best person to be your power of attorney for healthcare, and we're talking specifically healthcare, because you can have different people, a different person for healthcare versus finance.
Correct.
Or what would you recommend for someone?
Well, as I say, it's not about what does love got to do with it. It's not about love, who you love the most. It's about who is going to make those decisions for you that you want made. And so you need people who, if you want the plug pulled, who are going to be able to make that choice. And not that they aren't going to have some kind of emotion attached with it, but they're fulfilling what you want. And so that's what I recommend, is you pick the person who you know is going to carry out your wishes the way that you would have them carried out.
Now, if I put things in place when I'm 20, I'm now 40 plus, how often should you be updating those documents? I mean, how often is it something that you have to go back and look at?
Well, I encourage people to review it every couple of years if you're that young, or if something's changed in your life, if you get married, or if someone that you name has passed away, or you fall out of touch with that person and you're not comfortable, then you can change it. It's a fluid document, so once you do it doesn't mean that it's stuck in stone. You can change it at any time. So I always encourage people to review it, every 2-3 years.
Okay.
To make sure that those are the people that you still want to have in place to make those decisions for you.
Okay. I'm going to put up now, right now, this is the information for A Touch of Grace Hospice. We always like to put this up. We know that sometimes the questions you may have are not questions you want to ask over the air. This is a phone number that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Someone's there to answer the phone. We also have a website with information on it. So if you have questions or anything about hospice, you're not sure if maybe it's appropriate for someone you know, please do not hesitate to jot down this number. Give us a call. We're happy to help you. If you also have a question, you're welcome to call into the live call-in show that right now, and that number is 312-738-1060. I'm also going to put Ms. Dixon's information back up again. Elise, do you want to share your information again?
Sure. If you would like to contact me after the show, you see the number up there. It's 312-553-0336. That is my direct line. And again, our website is www.barclaydixonsmith.com. So feel free to give me a call.
Great. Thank you. One of the other things, and the hospice that I work with, A Touch of Grace, a lot of our focus is in the African American community. There's a lot of disparity in the use of hospice. We also know that that same disparity exists as far as having advanced directives in place. And why do you see that? Do you have any ideas why that is the case? Or
I ask that question all the time, and I just think we just don't like to deal with the possibility of dying until we're there. A lot of people are kind of superstitious, I believe, and think that if they put things in place, that means that they're planning to die. And that's not it at all. Again, I am a proponent of educating the community on this and doing, estate planning as well. It all kind of comes together. Putting your house in order, because it's all about your family. And it's just making sure that things are in place if something happens. So I wish that our community would be more proactive with hospice as well. I'm a big proponent of that. When I have clients or friends who are, in a terminal situation, that's one of the questions that I ask, are they on hospice? Because a lot of people don't understand what hospice is and how beneficial it can actually be to someone. Yes, it does mean you have a terminal illness, but it doesn't mean that you're going to die at that date. But a lot of times that's what happens, and so people associate hospice with death, immediate death, I should say. Yeah. And
unfortunately, like you said, it's because a lot of times when hospice is brought up, it's brought up and the patient begins hospice, and because their illness is so progressed, they are dying within a week. Unfortunately, our goal is to have people experience the benefits of hospice for much, much longer. Mm-hmm. We've had families, patients be with us for 6 months up to a year. So, the reason that people do have that perception is, unfortunately, that's when people are starting to use hospice.
Well, and I think the medical community does not understand it as well. I think that's your biggest... Mm-hmm. That should be your biggest booster out there, are the doctors because they have to prescribe hospice.
Right.
And so, a lot of times they wait again until you're at the end, immediate end, and then they decide, let's put them in hospice. Right. And it's only a couple of days that they're there before they die.
Right. You know what? We have a caller. Oh, well, you know what? The caller would like some contact information. I'm going to go ahead and put it back up again. This is the information for Miss Dixon. The phone number is 312-553-0336. And also the website address is there as well.
Rachel, I just want to talk a little bit about guardianship.
Yes, please.
Because if you don't have the powers of attorney, then what happens? And as I stated, you have to go into court. And that is a process that becomes very expensive, can become very litigious depending on the family situation. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that is the best situation depending on if we have family members who are taking advantage of an elder a lot of times that's when that happens, and we do need to have a judge in place. But again, if you don't have a power of attorney and you need someone to make those decisions, we will have to go in court, file a petition, and that involves getting several attorneys in the case, and that money is taken out of that person's estate, which would normally go to the family. And every year you have to file what's called an accounting, and you have to use an attorney if you have assets. If you have someone that does not have any assets and you just need to make decisions regarding the person only, you can do that without an attorney.
We've also seen situations where there has been family dispute, and while that guardianship is taking place, the loved one is placed in a nursing home.
Yes.
So instead of the loved one being home where they want to be, they're required to be in a nursing home until the dispute is settled. And that's normally not what someone or the loved ones want either.
Right.
And that's what we see.
Right.
We do have a caller. You know what? We'll be with that caller in just a minute.
So that's why I encourage people to do the powers of attorney, because it's a lot cheaper to do that versus going into court.
Right. And the time.
And the time.
It takes time.
And usually it's the person who you least want to be in charge of you that's petitioning the court to become in charge of you. And I'm sure no one out there knows what I'm talking about, but you've heard of other members of your friends and families who may have gone through this.
Okay. Caller? Caller, you're on the air. Caller, do you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering how you get your doctor to prescribe hospice to you.
Great question. Well, there's a few different ways. One, if, for example, say I have a loved one, I'm caring for my mom and my mom's very ill, I can call a hospice directly and ask the hospice if they can help me, and then the hospice will contact my doctor and see if the doctor thinks that it might also be something that would be beneficial. Sometimes the patient or the family will talk to the doctor themselves, and then other times we can even just request medical information, and based on that medical information, our own doctor can then determine if hospice would be appropriate. So there's several different ways, but that's a great question. Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Okay. You know, I know just from us, we do a lot of education together, and I know that's something that's very important to you as well. What are some, you've shared examples and situations, and they're sad, and that's, I think, we've seen it, personally, families that have been impacted by this. Do you have kind of a story that's like always stayed with you?
Well, I have a lot of stories. I'm going through, we have clients right now who we have powers of attorney. Let's talk about if someone is abusing a power of attorney. And those are difficult. In fact, I got a call this evening from someone who thinks that their sister might be taking advantage of mom, who was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But you typically have to have proof. And I've had situations where children have actually tried to poison their parents. The family members came in and was able to rescue mom from that. But you get a lot of situations where children, are waiting for parents to die and are going to do what they can to, try to speed that up, or, take what they can while they're living, take advantage of mom and dad if they're not all there together mentally. So, it's, I have many stories, unfortunately. I had a family last week whose mom just died, and I stated to them, I was just so happy that they all got along.
Right.
Because that's a rarity. That's not the normal. Most times you have families, there's always one person in the family who's trying to take advantage of one of the parents. I've actually had a family who came in, the father came in and wanted the whole family there. I think I did the will and powers of attorney for them at that time, but he wanted the family to know this is what's going to happen, because they had children who had already tried to take advantage of them. So, again, I encourage the listeners out here to put things in order now. Do not wait until you are in a crisis situation, because a lot of times it's just too late to do something at that point.
All right. Well, thank you, Miss Dixon. Our time has run out, but we hope you will join us again next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.